2020 has certainly been a challenging year for our community. Throughout the coronavirus pandemic, so much has changed in the way we communicate with each other, the way we function as a city. But there are still very important decisions to be made by city government about this crisis and about so many other things. So we wanted to provide an opportunity for elected officials to communicate directly with their constituents. Welcome to Ward Updates, a series of one-on-one interviews with Ottawa City Councillors. We'll talk about the issues arising from the pandemic that affect you, your families, and your neighbors. We'll talk about some of the stories of people throughout the city who have risen to the occasion in helping others. And we'll also talk about some of the big issues City Council is facing in the months ahead, aside from the pandemic. Our guest today is Jean Cloutier, the City Councillor for Ward 18, Alta Vista. Jean, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Mark. It's nice to be with you. I hope you and your family remain well.
We are, thank you. And I hope the same is true for you. Tell us a little bit about how your world has changed during this pandemic.
As city councillors, we're very close to the residents of our ward. It's the closest form of government, and that has never been more true than during COVID-19. For councillors, the work has not diminished. It certainly has increased from March until now. And it is a time of privilege to be of service to the residents of our city who need information, who need resources, and that we seek to help. But it has certainly changed in terms of the community meetings that we attend, the community events that we attend. All of these have been put on hold or cancelled, or we have found another way to do it, i.e. the virtual computer internet meeting. So it has certainly changed the method, but the services that people need, the resources that people need, that has augmented. And from March, let me just say, from March till about mid-May, early June, it was everything related to COVID and how to navigate providing assistance to other levels of government because of the programs that are administered by the province or by the federal government, providing assistance with respect to city services that are relevant to the needs of the population. Until about early June, it was all COVID, but I've seen a shift since then. Traffic is always an issue. Planning applications are an issue. And so we are seeing a little bit more questions, concerns, emails about those. It's a little bit of a return to a normal or a new normal in terms of the issues that are important for residents.
Just on communication with residents, and not just for you, but for City Hall generally, how do you think that has changed during this time? What impact is it having? What are some of the lessons arising from that in terms of how you're able to get the message out, how you're able to hear from constituents? Because obviously a lot of the ways you would normally interact are not possible at this time.
Indeed. With respect to COVID, two aspects. My team and I, we distributed door to door 8,000 pamphlets, flyers that we were able to drop at 8,000 doors in Alta Vista that provided the resources, mental health resources, OPH resources, safe at home, a food bank, other government levels, and it just listed those resources and of course how to contact me should people require information or assistance. That's number one. So we've reached out that way. We've also continued, increased the publication of our, what was a weekly newsletter, what then became 3 times per week newsletter, to provide timely, relevant, and reliable information for the residents of the ward, because in a fast-paced environment like this, a changing environment like this, we want to minimize the risk of misinformation and provide good sources. And the other aspect is that I have the privilege at this time, truly the privilege, to be a member of the Ottawa Board of Health. And in terms of communication, there is a crackerjack team there at OPH in terms of their communication strategy, be it via traditional media, be it via Twitter or social media. They have gotten sometimes funny, relevant, reliable, timely, impactful communications out to the residents, and I think they appreciate that. And so all of those aspects from the ward councillor to that specific department at the city, very important that communication be crisp, clear, timely, and relevant.
Specifically about Ottawa Public Health, are there lessons that we can learn from this pandemic that can be applied going forward? I know, and I'm not trying to point any finger of blame or anything like that. It's more about the opportunity to learn from this crisis, because I know there were people who felt that at times the message wasn't consistent, that on the one hand, the city was saying, go out and walk and do things or support local business. On the other hand, stay home and don't take the risk. So do you think we needed to have a more, and in the future need to have a more cohesive message when something like this happens?
I understand what you're saying. We have to remember how quickly things were changing in March and April, and dealing with the emergence and the strength, if I could use that term, of the virus, and how quickly it was coming through the community. And so government officials, be it public health or other levels of government, were doing the best they could with the information they had, and we saw that with masks. At the beginning, the guidance was that people didn't have to wear a mask, but as more scientific evidence emerged and more data emerged, we found that masks were a valuable tool, not the entire answer, but certainly a valuable tool in reducing the risk of transmission of the virus. And so that message went out, and I understand, and I, like other councillors, have received emails from residents vis-a-vis the confusion, vis-a-vis the apparent mixed message. But the message change as the information changes, as the evidence changes, as the data changes, and it's important that we as government officials be as forthright in that, making decisions with a lot of variables and in an uncertain environment.
Just before we talk more about some of the implications from this crisis, including the financial implications for the city budget, tell me a little bit about what's been happening in your ward and some of the examples of people who have been rising to the occasion and supporting each other, because there has been a huge amount of community support, of heroic activity. So give me some examples of what's been happening in Alta Vista.
Thank you for that opportunity, Mark. And we've been working since the COVID started. We're working with reaching out food banks. We have 5 food banks in Alta Vista, and that needed support. And it was important that, and I worked with the local food bank, the Heron Emergency Food Cupboard, to make sure that they were able to continue with their hours for those who needed that service. And it's an area where people really rely on that service. We have community associations, the Canterbury Community Association, for example, that runs programs out of the Canterbury Community Centre that had to shut down, but has since reopened and is providing free programming, outdoor fitness under that structure. That is under the structure, the Jim Tubman Chevrolet Sens Rink, which is ideal in a situation like this because it is open air, it is an ice pad, it is covered, and so they're able to provide programming free at that location for residents. Now that we are in phase 3, they were not allowed to do so during phase 1 and phase 2, but now that those structures are reopening, they're able to do so. So I'm happy that that's done. But there are other examples, and I want to bring to your attention and to the attention of the viewers, an organization that's called Food for Thought. Food for Thought Cafe, and it has delivered. It is run by a gentleman. His name is Sylvain de Margerie, who lives in my ward. And Food for Thought has delivered 65,000 hot meals to needy people in Ottawa, not only in Alta Vista, some in Carlington, since the start of COVID-19. And it's a volunteer-led, non-for-profit organization that provides those hot meals to low-income people who can't cook. And it could be because they're lodged without a kitchen, because of age, because of disability, or for any other reason, and some of them with children. Monsieur de Margerie, the president, recently got the United Way Community Builder Award, along with one of his colleagues and another chef and restaurateur, Joe Thornton-Gall, I believe his name is. I hope I pronounced it correctly, who's received the award also. And so there are countless examples like that of people who have helped each other, of people who have reached out to each other and provided support and checked in on each other. And I have received emails. I and many other councillors have received emails from residents advising us of the work that their neighbors are doing. Kind, generous, charitable, humble work of just checking in, taking the pulse of their neighbors, of their neighborhood, and that's so important. Another important aspect, if I can, is that we have to be cognizant of is the way COVID has impacted different people in many different ways. That we have many people in Alta Vista, hospital workers, and we could talk about the impact that COVID has had on them, and we have government workers, and all relatively stable through this, but many people who've been impacted by COVID in many different ways. And I'm thinking of those who are members of the shelter system, residents who are in shelters here in Ottawa. And as you might recall, Mark, early in May, the Jim Durrell Recreation Centre was opened to house 150 men who are residents of the shelter system at the Mission and Shepherds of Good Hope and the Salvation Army. And we advise the community association, and it is important and necessary because we wanted to reduce the risk of transmission in the shelter system, because we did not want to have an outbreak. It would have been devastating for them. The update on that is that that temporary shelter will be closing. We will be moving the residents, and there are approximately 40 residents of the Jim Durrell Recreation Centre. Will be moving shortly to the Dempsey Community Centre, which is also in my ward. It is a smaller shelter, because Jim Durrell was set up for 100 to 150 persons, and the maximum that we ever had in there was approximately 50, and currently there are 40 people who are living there. And so we will be transferring to the Dempsey Community Centre. It will be easier to heat in the winter as the weather gets a little bit colder, but it will have the same amenities until we could find a more permanent solution for those users of the Jim Durrell Recreation Centre.
All right, thank you for sharing that. There are so many implications of this, obviously. I wanted to get your thoughts on how business has been impacted. You mentioned a couple of businesses, and at a local level, at a street level, obviously, retail stores, restaurants, other companies have been dramatically affected by this. But in addition to that, more broadly, what impact has this had on the city's economic development efforts, on tourism? I know you've been involved in the film office as well. So what's your sense of what this is doing to our local economy?
It is a very difficult situation for local retailers from the point of view of their very survival. The impact on the city is that if businesses close, it reduces the products and services that are available on that street in that area for residents, and it has an implication on property taxes, on employment, and on the walkability of those streets. We want those streets to be active and animated, and to be safe for people to walk along. And I'm referring to Bank Street along my ward and other places. So it has that impact on the community. City certainly has started the Buy Local campaign, and we have many great businesses in Alta Vista, and we have also we the city have also made it easier for restaurants to provide patio space and to help them get through the crisis that is the COVID-19. There is no economic recovery that passes through with COVID in our midst. It is important that we eliminate the virus, that we get a vaccine, and that we be able to return to full normal economic activity as quickly as possible, recognizing that could be in the very, very long term. I was a member of Ottawa 2017 and certainly learned a lot about the tourism industry and its impact on our community during that important year. And since then, it is the third largest industry in Ottawa after government services and the high-tech sector, and it employs well over 30,000 people. It has a huge economic impact, and it has been devastated by the pandemic, and we all understand why. It's important that we support those businesses that are part of the tourism industry as locals, so that they can continue to provide the services that they do. With respect to other activity, yes, thank you for mentioning the Ottawa Film Office that does great work, always has, and I'm a member of that board. The Ottawa Film Office, film production, animated and live action, is a $100 million industry in Ottawa. It employs a lot of people. It provides a lot of exposure for the city, and it provides a lot of employment and educational opportunities. There are education programs at Algonquin and at La Cité Collégiale, all part of trades and professional activity that would eventually get into film production. And in that, I'm happy to remind viewers that Council has approved and passed the development of an 80,000 square foot, 4 sound stages, $40 million project that will be at the corner of Woodruff and Baseline. Woodruff and Hunt Club, just opposite the Nepean Sportsplex. And that will increase film production, and we want to attract more film production to Ottawa so that we could continue to diversify our economy, so that we could continue to provide employment, and so that we could continue to provide exposure of Ottawa as a place to visit, as a place to come film to residents outside of our economy.
What are your thoughts on how much of a change is going to result from this pandemic? What will change permanently? What will go back to normal? What's your sense of how it will affect how people move in the future, where they go to work, whether they go to work or work from home, how they will use public transit, some of those things?
Absolutely right. The economy that will emerge from the pandemic is not the economy that we had last January. I'm a member of the Transit Commission, and first to acknowledge all the difficulties that we've had with the LRT, and we want to resolve those and stabilize that system. And we were well on our way. We have our next Transit Commission meeting in mid-September, and we'll have an update at that time. But there's been a lot of progress, and RTG has been fortunate, if you will, that they have been able to have less of a load of people riding the transit system from March until now, so that they could do the repairs and the adjustments to the LRT system that are necessary. To your fundamental question, we are seeing only about 30% of our regular transit riders on LRT at this time. governments and other large businesses, Shopify, for example, have indicated that they will not be returning to normal office environments. In a pandemic environment, the elevators can't bring up and bring down the number of people in the time that it takes to, and while respecting physical distancing. And those are the realities. People have found new functionality, new acceptance, and new capabilities in medias, for virtual meetings such as this, and they have become more comfortable with it. So we are going to be seeing more of that. The retail environment, I touched on it earlier. People have become more adept and accepting of ordering groceries online, ordering other goods and services online, and having it delivered to their door. So all of those will have an impact on our main streets, on the walkability of our streets, on the economy, on the employment. Property taxes, property values will all be impacted. The exact level and scope of that impact is unclear to me, but it will certainly have an impact, and the way governments
Right.
and people do things will certainly change.
What about public transit? Can you say with any confidence at this point that when the demand returns, that we will have a fully functioning, effective, reliable light rail system, given all the issues we've had in the past year?
Absolutely. I absolutely understand the question and the concern. We will get that update in mid-September. As you know, the city provided the letter to RTG that we expected, and that was in March, right before the pandemic hit, and the emergency orders came down to RTG, and they have been responsive to that. There have been updates and there have been meetings. I have sat in those meetings. It's with the head of the three corporations that make up RTG, and they have heard loud and clear that the city, that the mayor, councillors, members of the Transit Commission are not happy with the functionality, with the reliability of the LRT, and that those things need to change. To your basic question, can I say with any assuredness that we will return to that we will get a fully reliable 100% system when those loads return? I cannot. Not right now, but I can say that the elements of the doors, of the tracks, of the switches, of the catenary system, all of those have been looked at and improvements made, and I expect that they will be able to carry the load when we get back to that full ridership. I hope we get back to full ridership. I do not expect that we will do so in September. Some of the numbers that I've heard are that we expect about 50% full ridership, and a little bit of the reason of that is that many university students won't be returning to live present classes as they would usually do. So many of them will be online, and so again, and government workers again, which is a big portion of the ridership of our system, will not be returning as they did before. So we expect 50%. But notwithstanding, even for those the riders that are on the system, we want to provide
Right.
safe, reliable transit experience for them.
What about the city's finances? There's a big shortfall looming because of the decline in transit fares and other factors as well. How are we going to fix that?
192 million is the most recent estimate by our treasurer, Wendy Stephenson, who just started January 1st. She was assistant treasurer, but boy, talk about a jumping into the hot water. But I've appreciated my conversations with her very much, and the work is very difficult for finance people. We have received assurances of 124 million from other levels of government to try to deal with that $192 million deficit, but there's still a ways to go, and there will still be more programs that will be announced by the federal and provincial government. For example, as the councillor for Alta Vista, have already received notice that there are some capital projects that will be deferred. They do not have to be done now. They are not critical. The infrastructure is able to whether it be a water, sewer, water main replacement or whatever, those that can stand another couple of years of use without risk, without elevated risk. Will be deferred, and so I expect to see more of that from the city as we get updates from the finance team, from Wendy Simpson and her team. Operating the services that the city provides are critical. You've touched on it a little bit. There are OC Transpo, there are police, there are paramedics, they are library services. Even in a pandemic environment, all these services are very important to the residents of the city, and we will compress those costs as much as possible and reduce those costs as much as possible. But again, the services are needed by our residents, and I expect that we will continue to provide those services. We will be able to cut some capital costs or defer some of those capital expenses, but it is a very difficult situation, and I absolutely acknowledge that whether it be federal funds, provincial funds, or municipal funds, there is only one taxpayer. Absolutely understand that. It's going to be a very sobering, if I can use the term sobering, next couple of years in terms of the debt and the deficits that governments are carrying, because that have partially been caused by COVID.
All right. Jean Cloutier, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate it. I hope you continue to be well. Thank you for joining us on this ward update.
Mark, it is always a pleasure. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Jean Cloutier, that concludes our ward update for Alta Vista, Ward 20. Thank you for watching.